This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bonini, and these are your headlines. Theft on an unimaginable scale in the Ukraine. Monkeypox goes global, and a woman is arrested for using a 5-year-old as a personal slave. But first, more on our main story. The war in Ukraine continues, and there has been yet more bloody fighting. But there is something going on that most people are simply not aware of. A story that will affect every single person watching this report, and that is the greatest theft in Ukrainian history.
Over the past week, a story has been developing, and its genesis lays in this video that you are watching. What you are seeing is theft on an epic scale, the largest in the history of Ukraine. These trucks that are clearly marked with the Russian letter Z are filled with stolen Ukrainian grain, and it is estimated over 400,000 tons have been stolen so far. But it is where these trucks are going to that is rather interesting. They are heading to Crimea, to the port of Sebastopol, which is located at the southern base of Crimea. On this map, Sebastopol is just above the words Black Sea. The convoy of trucks are to rendezvous with a huge grain cargo ship that can hold 30,000 metric tons. In this satellite image we can see here, we can see very clearly a Russian grain ship docked at port. To the left, the 3 lines of cylindrical buildings are grain silos. It is there that the trucks deliver the stolen grain, and then it is transferred onto the ships, tens of thousands of tons at a time.
Ukraine produces 80 million metric tons of grain every year. A million metric tons is known as an MMT. Ukraine is one of the largest grain suppliers in the world, and at current 27 million tons are stuck in the Ukraine. Add in this the huge Russian theft, and this is a major issue for global food supplies. To give you a clearer perspective, a single MMT of wheat contains about 3.5 trillion food calories, which is enough to feed the entire population of Africa for approximately 2 days. The loss of so much grain to the global food chain will increase food costs globally, and those that will suffer the most are the poor and those who already are struggling to feed their families.
And it's not just exports the Russian army are into, they are also importing. And what they're bringing into Ukraine is a mass of tanks. In this footage, we can see them being brought in by rail. And looking upon them, you may think they're all jolly frightening. But let us freeze the frame and have a closer look. And what is the real story behind this freight? These are T-62 tanks, not the modern T-90. And what I tell you next, I believe will amaze you. These tanks were designed in 1961 and built up until 1975. These tanks are so outdated, they are simply obsolete. And worst of all, they have been sitting in warehouses and open fields for decades. The reason they are being sent in is that at least 1,000 Russian tanks have been destroyed, and that figure is collated by photographic evidence only, not from some government figures. So consider, putting a 60-year-old man into battle would be foolish, but putting a 60-year-old tank in is utter desperation. They have no night vision and no computers to aid with ranging, firing or target acquisition, and the armour is woefully inadequate for a modern war. It may as well be something like cardboard egg boxes. Now, if you think that's a joke, about the cardboard egg boxes for armour, I ask you to look at this image. For what the Ukrainians have found on the battlefield is unbelievable. They have been discovering abandoned Russian tanks, and instead of having ballistic armor to protect the crew, they have in fact discovered it's been replaced with cardboard egg boxes. Now, the question is, why is this? And the answer is very brief. It's corruption. So some corrupt official, instead of putting in the correct armor, basically stole the money and just packed egg boxes in. Now, imagine if you are a Russian soldier, how that would make you feel on the battlefield, as the Ukrainians are still raining down fire from above. And there you are, a Russian tank crewman going into battle with a 60-year-old tank that has the technology of Fred Flintstone's car and the armor plating of an armadillo in a rain mac. I don't think it'll be too long before we start seeing many videos of T-62 tanks abandoned, as no crew in their right mind would drive one of these onto a modern battlefield, thinking for one moment they had any possibility of entering into a fair fight.
The government is looking into the possibility of purchasing a monkeypox vaccine as a standby measure amid growing outbreaks of the disease in many countries. Monkeypox is a cousin of smallpox, and more than 250 cases have been reported in 23 countries. Also, Thailand has announced 12 people are under observation after being in contact with the disease.
The world is reacting to the threat that is monkeypox. The United States has already begun releasing a monkeypox vaccine from the Strategic National Stockpile to protect high-risk people. Germany has ordered 40,000 doses to be ready to deploy on those if infected, and if their outbreak becomes more severe. A Cambodian Ministry of Health spokesperson said this week that the ministry is taking precautionary steps to deal with the monkeypox virus, even though the country has no confirmed cases. Monkeypox is seldom reported outside of Africa. However, the United Kingdom reported its first case from a person who had returned from Nigeria. It now has 30 cases. There are also confirmed cases being reported in Europe and the United States, but we must keep the threat in balance. The mortality rate is around 3.6%, and the virus is not highly contagious. The emergence of so many cases in Europe and the US has prompted scientists to research further and to see if this disease has become more virulent. At current, there have been no related deaths. The symptoms are fever, muscle aches, lesions and chills, and most people recover within a few weeks, and currently there is no specific treatment for monkeypox. Although the situation is causing great concern, the reality is the fatality rate is very low, and the disease is not that contagious.
Imagine for a moment you need some help around the house. Maybe you would ask a friend or a relative. Maybe you would hire a cleaner. What I'm sure you would not do is take the course of action that one woman did, which was to buy a 5-year-old girl and to use her as a slave. Not only that, she beat her violently on a regular basis.
The Cambodian National Council for Children is investigating a child trafficking case after a woman was arrested for abusing a 5-year-old girl in Phnom Penh. The girl was forced by the 37-year-old woman to act as a domestic servant. The General Secretary of the CNCC said, "A 5-year-old child was repeatedly and severely assaulted by the 37-year-old woman. She beat the girl like an animal." The council and relevant officials are investigating this case, and we are looking into the potential for child trafficking. The 5-year-old child was given up by her parents, and the victim had been living with her abuser since 2021. Violations against children increased after many kids dropped out of school following the COVID-19 pandemic. Abuses often happen when parents leave for prolonged periods of time to go and work, leaving children at home. Also, when parents fight and the family unit breaks down. The accused woman was sent to a district police station for questioning, and she was named as Chan Tida. And it was in a rented house in Phnom Penh that she acquired this defenceless 5-year-old child and treated her as a personal slave and beat her regularly. This case is almost beyond comprehension, and in the eyes of many, there is no jail sentence long enough for someone as inhumane and this cruel.
Drug-related crimes are the #1 cause for crime, and the increase in large seizures of illicit drugs are an indicator that these crimes are on the rise, fueled by organised crime. And this blight will continue to bring misery unless decisive action is taken.
The Phnom Penh Municipal Court announced drug crimes are the top reason for prosecutions within Cambodia. Drug offences account for 70% of all crimes committed. Theft was the next highest category, and quite astonishingly, the third highest was cases involving murder, which even outranked fraud. This week saw yet another major drug bust when police arrested 4 Chinese men. They were taken to the Phnom Penh Municipal Court to be charged formally. They are accused of possessing more than 11 tons of drug-related chemicals and 40 kilograms of ketamine. It is an astonishing amount of drug-producing chemicals. There have been many of these huge busts, and what they are doing now is not processing drugs by the kilo in these small factories, but by the ton. The police say the Chinese men had hired a Cambodian farmer's farm on the pretext of growing mango trees, but just like an episode from Breaking Bad, they had converted it into a major drugs lab. The plan was to export the drugs to Taiwan by sea, a police officer has said. The case itself is now being investigated by the courts, and the men will be sent to prison during the pre-trial period. If convicted, the suspects could well be handed down life sentences.
There is some good news in the world of business. Just prior to the COVID outbreak, the World Bank predicted grand things for Cambodia's economy, saying it would grow by 5%. Then the pandemic hit, and analysts revised their forecasts downward, saying it would fall as low as 3%. Well, the kingdom has surprised them all.
The Cambodian economy outperformed all predictions, growing at 5.1% this year, and is expected to grow to 6.2% in 2023, according to the Ministry of Finance. There are risks, though, such as high inflation and the ongoing Russian war, and with a slowdown of the Chinese economy. All these could easily cause a correction to those optimistic figures. The 6.2% forecast is reliant on the growth of the tourism and agricultural sectors. But there are concerns over problems with the rapid growth of private credit and the economic risks faced by the construction and real estate sectors. The private loan sector has caused grave concern for some time, as many are now crippled with ill-conceived debts that cannot be serviced. Many took out loans with little or no understanding as to how interest rates are calculated. The real estate sector also saw an explosion in buildings and has left many wondering, where are the consumers to fill the empty towering skyscrapers of apartments that now proliferate the capital? A strong hand must be kept on the tiller, And although the outlook is certainly good, there are some real issues that need to be addressed.
And now it's time to look at our sports news. Defending champion Novak Djokovic showed outstanding form this week as he reached the French Open fourth round without dropping a single set all week. The top seed remains on course for a potential quarter-final meeting with Spain's 13-time champion Rafael Nadal. Nadal, who was beaten by Djokovic in a gripping semi-final last year. Nadal, though, may not be fully fit as he carries a chronic foot problem, which he thought may end his career last year, and his recent rib injuries are believed to be plaguing him. But saying that, no wise man would place money against him going all the way. It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week.
And here it is for next week, and we notice that both Friday and Sunday are bookended by severe storms. There's rain across the board. And what's also there is humidity up to 62% and potentially beyond. The temperatures in the early 90s.
This has been the Khmer Times News. You can contact myself at the studio by mailing us at ktnewsstudio@gmail.com. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next Saturday for your weekly roundup.